Do you know the Mike Tyson story?
No.
So Mike Tyson, when he was 13, Mike Tyson had a terrible childhood, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. It was just like horrible neighborhood crime and, in and out of detention centers. He gets adopted when he's 13 by this guy, Cus D'Amato, who's one of the greatest trainers of all time, but also a hypnotist. So Cus D'Amato starts hypnotizing Mike Tyson when he's 13 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
And when he talks to him about fighting, he's like, you don't exist, only the task. So all of the things like, what? Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm this. Maybe I'm that. Maybe I'm a fraud. You don't exist. It's only the task, and you are going to be the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. And if Cus didn't die, he had an unbelievable, spectacular career, but you can tell the difference when Cus is gone. He doesn't have that mentor anymore, doesn't have that leadership, and eventually it kind of falls apart for him. He wins the title when Cus had already been dead, but then defends the title. He was just unstoppable. He was so much better than everybody else, but slowly but surely up until the Buster Douglas fight, you see like this deterioration of his discipline and resting on his laurels and fear. Everyone was so terrified of him. By the time they got into the ring, they were already beaten.
Yeah.
You'd see the look in their eye when he was staring at you. They would be like, oh, fuck. And so if Cus was still alive, like who knows what he would have accomplished? Who knows? He probably would have never lost. If Cus stayed alive, if Cus was like slightly younger and was able to make it with him deep into his career, who knows?
Yeah.
But hypnotized him when he was 13.
And that's early. I mean, you're still getting your formative identity and beliefs about the world.
Also, you all of a sudden have love in your life. All of a sudden you have respect. All of a sudden you have people who appreciate you for what you do. And so you really like dig into this thing. Yeah. So Jim Jacobs was his manager, and Jim Jacobs is also an archivist. He has the greatest archive of boxing films in the world. So he's got all the old fighters, Stanley Ketchel and Jack Johnson and Jack Dempsey. And so Mike Tyson, when he's not training, is watching the greatest boxers of all time on film, which nobody has access to. Most boxers, you are as good as the gym you train in. If you're training in a gym with Tommy Hearns, like, damn, he is so good, and you learn by being around him, and you see what he does, and you try to emulate it. The best gyms always have some fucking assassins at the very top, world champions, top of the food chain guys, and everybody else sort of like follows their beat, and you absorb. Well, Mike Tyson was absorbing from everybody. He was absorbing from Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson. He was watching everybody. Archie Moore. He was watching all the greats. Just hours and hours and hours and hours of studying films.
So it was proximity. So
it was everything.
He got proximity and like exposure to all that, and nobody else
and genetics. When he was 13 years old, he was 190 pounds.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Teddy Atlas used to take him to what they call smokers. Smokers are like these amateur sort of unregulated fights. And they would say, how old is he? And he'd say 13, like, bullshit. And he like, how old do you think he is? He's like 16. And so they put him in with 16-year-olds, and he knocked them out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he was knocking everybody out. He was just a genetic freak on top of being very intelligent but never really applied to anything other than boxing, fully absorbed with boxing. Has a trainer who's one of the greatest trainers of all time, trained Floyd Patterson, Jose Torres. I mean, Cus D'Amato was a legendary world champion trainer. And then on top of that, he's a hypnotist. So he's like deeply involved in the psyche of his fighters. And he's a mentor figure to this kid. And so you have that combination of things, and you have that guy, the greatest. Mike Tyson at 79 at the age of 13. That's him at 13.
Oh, my gosh.
Fuck. Look at the size of his biceps. Bro, look at his biceps. Look at his fucking right bicep at 13. That is insane. I know. Muhammad Ali above that is 12 years old, and Tyson's 13 and built like a tank. That is so crazy.
He's a monster.
Oh, everything was perfect. It was the perfect storm. Intelligence, genetics, training, proximity. And, he was around great fighters as well. He was in gyms in the Catskills with some of the best fighters of his era.
Does he credit like psychedelics for his like this transformation that he's made?
He does talk about it. Yeah, he does talk about it. I'm sure it had an impact on him. That and marijuana, both those things had an impact on him.
I mean, he's got to be I mean, just fighting for that long, your brain's going through so much, and you've got to come back to earth. It's like a dude coming off a 5-year deployment or something over in the Middle East. Like, you've got to reestablish yourself back to a normal. And I've heard him just talk about it once, where he talked about, I think it was just psilocybin. But that saved me from a lot of really crazy stuff as well. He is just a guy who knows. I would be terrified. Like, if I was a cop and pulled him over and he said, "Go ahead and get back in your car," I'd be like,
okay.
Yeah.
But when he first did the podcast, he was not working out at all, and he was smoking weed all day long, and he was like silly and peaceful and relaxed, and he said he didn't want to work out because if he did, he would reignite his ego, and he didn't want to do that. And then the second time I saw him was when he was preparing for the Roy Jones fight, and he had lost like 100 pounds. He was shredded, and like all his muscles were just fucking big and thick and puffed up, and he looked terrifying. It was like, and Jamie and I were like, that's a totally different person. Like, from the first episode he did to the second episode, completely different person, because he was Mike Tyson again. He was getting ready to fight again, and he was fucking terrifying. And this is Mike Tyson again at 50, right? So imagine what Mike Tyson at 22 was like. I mean, it had to be fucking terrifying.
I bet he won so many fights just psychologically.
Oh, yeah.
Just standing across the ring looking at that guy. Even if I was a good fighter, I'm like, man.
Yeah, everybody was terrified of him.
You're standing there like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, he had an aura, and all the greats have auras like that. Roy Jones had that aura in his prime too, where you knew the fighter that he was facing was fucked. And it, eventually catches up with you, and it did with Mike, with Buster Douglas, and then Evander Holyfield and some of the other fights after that. But, when a fighter has that aura, it takes a very special, confident person to overcome that.